Welcome to the NBA Coast to Coast podcast brought to you by thelines.com. Coming to you from the West Coast, Josh Lander, joined by my guy Nate Weitzer on the East Coast. And it's Wednesday night in the NBA. We've got an 8-game slate here for you guys. A couple game videos and our player props up for you today, as always. So like and subscribe to that page and continue to follow along with us each and every weekday this season. I also want you to head to thelines.com. You can check out all our great written content up there as well and use that odds finder tool that we have up there. You can make sure you're getting the best juice back on all those bets that you are getting from these U.S. sports books this NBA season. Nate, let's go ahead and jump into this slate and then talk about our game. The Wizards are playing host to the Bulls.
Yeah, we got the Pistons on a back-to-back after getting crushed last night. They're +7 at home against the Wolves. Anthony Edwards questionable. The Bulls are up to -1.5. They were opened at +1. Totals holding strong at 230. DeMar DeRozan's questionable, so we'll talk about that in a second. Pels +9.5 at Boston with a 231 total. Interesting line there. Seems a little high given how good the Pels are even without Zion and Ingram. Pacers +5 at the Knicks. The Bucks, the other game we'll talk about here, -2.5 at Atlanta. Totals 236. Spurs are +14 in Memphis. The Rockets are +10 in Sacramento. And the Suns, despite their utterly absurd win in Golden State last night with backups, are +13 in Denver. Odds makers not expecting a repeat there. Yeah, I mean, I was on the Bulls when it opened here. I mean, there hasn't been a ton of line movement, but I mean, to me, they're just a team that should be much better than they are. And I think for a while, they've had internal discussions about they're trying to blow this up. They're trying to end this Vooch DeRozan experiment, or at least pundits are calling for the front office to do that. And they're playing to stay together, and they like what they have to a degree. They should like what they have. I mean, they have a well-constructed roster. Certainly, if they could get Caruso and Lonzo Ball out there healthy again, they might look like they did early last season. But we've talked about them being a balanced scoring team, multiple guys. And so even if DeRozan's out, I don't think that they fall off a cliff here in terms of their efficiency. I mean, last time out against Washington, it was balanced. It was DeRozan 27, Vooch 25, LaVine 25. So those two guys can step up, but I think DeRozan's going to play. I mean, he called the quad strain. He said something he's been dealing with for eight games here. He called it nothing crazy. He said he takes pride in playing all 82 if he can. He hasn't missed a game yet this season. I mean, and while it's been bothering him for 8 games, he's still averaging 26 points per game at an efficient rate here. So, I mean, if you bet this before he's ruled in, then you're going to be feeling real good about it. I mean, they've won 4 of their last 5 here against the Wizards, who are just not really an inspiring team in any sense of the word. They've lost 4 of their last 6 at home. They're going to be without Bradley Beal again and have listed Porzingis, Kispert, and Daniel Gafford as questionable on the initial injury report here. So, again, if any of those guys are ruled out and you get this at a pick'em line, you're going to feel good about that. I mean, it's just the Wizards don't really threaten you with a lot offensively. I mean, especially when Beal is out. I mean, what they do score is down low. They're not a good three-point shooting team, and in this matchup, they've been abysmal. They've shot 25% in these last 5 meetings against the Bulls. And the one time the Bulls lost is because they happened to go ice cold, 7 for 27 from 3, and they lose a really low-scoring game. I mean, there's definitely a correlation that Washington would have a better chance if this is a low-scoring game, again, because they don't have much to threaten you with. They don't have the weaponry to match a team that has a big offensive three, maybe not defensive, but lately the Bulls, allowing very, very much limiting points in paint, including the 7th fewest points in the paint on the road in general, holding Boston to just 44 to send that game way under, also allowing the 3rd fewest second chance points on the year. So to me, it's a Washington team that's heavily dependent on their bigs right now, on having mismatches with Porzingis and Kuzma at the 3 maybe to get those second chances and get points down low. And I don't think they're really going to be here tonight against the Bulls team. And also, I mean, yeah, I talked about the Bulls had gone cold in that one loss, but lately they've been hitting their threes. I mean, particular Zach LaVine. They've won 4 of their last 6 on the road. In that span, LaVine has a 131 offensive rating, averaging 28 a game. hitting 5 threes a game, basically at 48%. And the team's hitting nearly 13 threes in that span. So I think they have balanced scoring. Also, Vooch, crushed the Wizards since he came to Chicago. 125 offensive rating. The Wizards are allowing the second most paint points in their last 3. So I think there's advantages here for Chicago all over, and that with basically no spread, I think we should be all over the Bulls.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about Washington is, like you said, like with such a sort of anemic offense at times where, if Kuz isn't just draining threes from all over, there doesn't seem to be much of an offense that's being run. Daniel Gafford's been getting some good time because he plays well in these sort of sloppy, get some offensive rebounds and muck things up kind of games as a true center, and getting a bit of time even with KP on the floor. Both of them questionable, as you said. Kispert also super important as we talk about their lack of shooting outside of guys like Kuz. You still need Kispert in there big time, as we've seen that be a large percentage of their offense. So when you look at like how they score, there isn't that much to it overall. We always talk about how Washington's sort of just fledgling in middle of the pack in pretty much everything. But if you look at the runs that they've been on, I think it's pretty indicative of how their season's going. I don't know what you expect out of Bradley Beal this season at this point. Like, hamstring is one of those injuries, like Paul George, where it's just like, I'm out, I'm in, I might not be out, I might be in. It hurts tonight, it doesn't hurt tomorrow. It sucks. It's one of the worst. So I'm just sort of nixing any expectations of what he could bring to this offense. Even if he came back right now, it would have to be pretty quick and instant. And I'm not sure what kind of explosiveness he'd have with that hammy. So they need to win with defense is the very long-winded point that I'm making. And that's why they won. They had that little streak of 5 in a row that they won. And if you look at why, I mean, they held the Kings on the Kings team who doesn't play offense on the road to 111. They held a 76ers team when they were at home as well. I'm sorry, the Kings game was at home. So that was the really surprising one. I remember they came out and we were all like, how did it was one of those random ones that the Kings just kind of gave up. But they held the Kings to 111 points in that game in Sacramento, which is even more impressive than what I was saying. They beat the Sixers at home in that weird game on the 27th. I believe they were missing Joel. And then they handled a Suns team, only giving up 102 to just an awful anemic Suns team. Beat a Magic team with nobody on their team in those games. And then that Bucks game that they won by 23 points, mostly because nobody was in that game as well for Milwaukee. So in those games where they were winning 5 in a row against all those anemic offenses that I just told you outside of the Kings, that was a huge surprise in that one. They had the number 1 defensive rating in the league at 103.4. They were causing a ton of steals at about 7.5 a game. They were blocking a bunch of shots. Like I said, Daniel Gafford was leading the league in blocks during that time frame as well, and so was their team. And they were getting a ton of points off of turnovers, second chance. Like I said, it was all just sloppy, nasty offense that really got them. Their defense just put them in a position to win games against other bad offenses. And then just fast forward to these last 3 where the Bucks got their team back and won in that overtime game by 10 against these Wizards. They got beat by 17, giving up 127 to the Thunder on the road, and then they just lost to the Pellies by 20 at home, giving up 132 to that Pellies team and just erupting in the second half. Those 3 games, they had the worst defensive rating in the league, 124.5, playing better offenses, just sort of coming back down to earth and not being able to take advantage of teams like Orlando, who didn't even have Franz or any of the Wagners playing in that game. I believe Paolo didn't even play in that game. So, this is a line that I think is here right now because DeMar is questionable, like you said. Even if he doesn't play, I do think they still have a bit more, especially because Zach LaVine has been coming back. He looked really, really good in that Celtics game. Maybe not all the way back yet athletically, but I think he's back enough that then DeMar either doesn't have it or doesn't play, which we haven't seen yet. But if he doesn't have it on a particular night, LaVine is back enough that I don't know who's going to really lock him up on Washington at this point. The way that they're playing defense and might not even have 2 7-footers in there to guard the paint when a high flyer like LaVine comes in there. So yeah, a lot to like for the Bulls tonight as the Wizards continue to reel all over the floor.
And don't underestimate how well the Bulls defense could play with Pat Williams hitting his stride, with Caruso probable. He's back in there. I think we lean under here at 230. There's definitely a wide range of outcomes when the Bulls are playing right now. And the Wizards, you just mentioned, had that defensive lapse the last couple, giving up a 130 defensive rating to the shorthanded Pels. So I don't think it's the preferred bet here. I mean, I think the Bulls could win a low-scoring game or a high-scoring game. and you gotta like their chances in the clutch if DeRozan's in there. But
Down the
Levine
stretch, yeah.
also been solid in the clutch lately. And I come back to where the defense struggles for Washington, which is either from the 3-point line lately in the paint, giving up the most points per game to centers in their last 7, and just both these teams being heavily dependent on unassisted field goals also plays into Chicago here because their biggest weakness defensively is giving up that high assist to turnover ratio. But Washington right now, I mean, it's kind of like you get that initial lift when a guy like Beal's out for maybe 5-7 games, but he's been out like 15 games this season already. And it's like the shine wears off, the shared ball movement wears off, and other teams have enough film to be like, all right, this is what we have to worry about. Let's just lock down and stop it. And it's easier to stop it without a true playmaker like Beal.
Yeah, 100%, and yeah, that the clutch numbers there too. I mean, Chicago's been sort of up and down, basically middle of the pack, but Washington's been really bad in the clutch with about the 8th worst net rating in those pretty crucial minutes. So plenty to like, even if this is a little bit closer down the stretch for Chicago to be the ones to pull it out. Especially if hopefully DeMar plays, and this bet looks really good at -1 if he does. So try to get ahead of that, might as well, right?
Yeah, you say the Bucks might be surging now. I think they'll at least have a little bit of momentum after coming back to beat the Knicks. I believe they were down 20 in the third quarter, and they just locked up, came back, almost got over the total, but not quite. They're still dead freaking last in offensive rating on the road, but they're also top 3 in defensive rating on the road. And Atlanta is 26th in offensive rating at home. Atlanta has really been showing no joy in playing basketball together, either struggling on one side of the floor or the other, depending where they are. At home, it's more often struggling on offense. So, I mean, 236 is a high total. I think first you look at that. And Atlanta does, sometimes let things get carried away by playing zero defense, but they've come to play in these matchups at least a little bit recently, winning the last 2 with no Drew Holiday in one of those games. The Bucks have started slow in both of the last 2 seasons, and I think now that they get the 4th meeting, this is already the final meeting with the Hawks of the season. I do think that they come with something a little bit more down the stretch. That last meeting in Atlanta, they only had 18 points in the fourth quarter. They've been struggling to score down the stretch, but I know you're going to talk about Joe Ingles being a guy to unlock that, and he was really key in that comeback against the Knicks. Also, you saw Drew and Brook Lopez step up hitting clutch shots, and for the first time in a while, they didn't need a superhuman Giannis performance to pull out a win. So, I mean, that's a good sign. It's great for Giannis's MVP campaign when he puts up 45 and 20 all the time, but it's not great for wins. I mean, the Bucks had lost like 6 of 7 with Giannis averaging his Wilt numbers. And now they're starting to play a little better as a team. So they have a 1-day rest disadvantage here. The Hawks been off for one more day as they come back home, but 7-3 straight up with a rest disadvantage. The Bucks. It's more about getting rhythm for them. It seems they're actually 4-0 on back-to-backs. This is not a back-to-back situation, but I mean, really, it's just getting Drew back in the flow of things. He's missed so many games with that non-COVID illness. You love to see him hit back-to-back step-back threes, and of course, in a matchup with Trey and DeJounte Murray, you're going to love to have him out there hounding them. So I worry that about the offenses for both teams. I think the under and the Bucks winning are equally appealing here. And maybe you take a parlay between the two, but I also have faith in the Bucks, much more faith than I do in the Hawks, who continue to struggle with chemistry issues and to have Trae Young's name floated in potential trades either this year or next, and just trying to figure out what the big issue is in terms of them not being able to get back to being a consistent team.
Yeah, and it's gonna sound weird, but I mean, me talking about Joe Ingles is through the lens of like they need him. They need someone with his skill set. They need a 6 foot 6'8", solid shooting, passing, playmaking, not necessarily by breaking the defense down off the dribble, but playmaking by, being an adult on offense. And Drew Holiday, as good as he is at like point guard, he's really always been sort of like a big good scoring, best defensive guard at the top of your defense kind of guy, not necessarily like set up your offense, get things going, and make sure that things run through, either Giannis or exactly you guys get it's not what he does, right? And that is what Joe Ingles does. And that's what Chris Middleton did a little bit more. And that's why I call him Joe Middleton Ingles right now, because he's providing the exact same type of offense and playmaking that Chris Middleton provided as well, using your strength and size to either get others open or yourself open, not necessarily break guys down off the dribble. So with him doing that in that Knicks game, he did play 14 minutes in both halves for 28 minutes, which was crucial. The most he's played is, since he's been back basically from being out for most of the season. 17 points and 5 assists in that 28 minutes versus the Knicks with that 127 O rating and 101 defensive rating, 45% from three, which is huge for this team. 5 for 11 from deep, which is what they needed, and almost as important, 5 assists to only 1 turnover. And I say all of that because against this Hawks team, that's exactly what they've needed and missed when they lost the last two, as Atlanta won 121-106 in Milwaukee, and then also at home earlier this season, 117-98. What you noticed that I just said there is on the road, the Bucks scored 106 and 98 points against this team. One of those was no Drew and Chris, and one of those was just no Chris Middleton. And in that game without Chris Middleton, but with Drew Holiday, Drew had like 8 turnovers, and the team had like 18 turnovers, which led to 20 points for Atlanta off of those turnovers. Because at home, Atlanta gets the 12th most points off of turnovers, or at least the highest percentage of their points are scored off of other teams' turnovers, right? And so if they're not going to be doing that because Drew Holiday is not the orchestrator of the offense as much as Joe Ingles is, then I feel a lot better about them not turning the ball over, which will hopefully allow them to improve upon the 105 offensive rating that they've had when they're playing on the road, rather, since December started for this Bucks team. So they're allowing 113 in those situations, but it's really because they're allowing the 4th most points off of turnovers in those situations. And if they could just, for the love of God, not turn the ball over with stupid mistakes, then I think they're going to be in a much better position. Without, Clint Capella, I also love their ability to sort of dominate a little bit more, maybe not scoring points in the paint outside of Giannis, who's really the only one that does that on this team. I think it's always surprising to see that they're not even like they're 15th, 16th in terms of points in the paint are the Bucks, but that's because, Brolo's still shooting 7 threes a game, and really everybody outside of Drew, who has not been attacking enough, and it hasn't really been himself on offense pretty much the whole season. He's also not getting to the rim. That's the only other guy besides Giannis that really scores down low and in that painted area. So without him doing that as well, we lean under here. The other thing is obviously Capella's out, which means this defense is much worse for the Hawks. They're up to about 118 defensive rating without him this season, as opposed to the 112, 113 that they have with him in. So, that's in like 13 games that they've played without him. That's clear that their D rating goes up pretty high at that point. So I do like some opportunity for Brolo to get boards, as I'll talk about in the player props video, and that's in part because I do think it might be a little bit choppier. I don't know that the Bucks, I told you after that game against the Knicks, needed some pretty crazy shots, not crazy, but those step back wing threes from Drew. He hit 2 threes and a 2-pointer because his foot was on the line from the exact same spot stepping back. Needed all those to bail him out. Also needed a Brolo deep corner 3 to bail them out. So their offense was anything but fluid. I don't expect it to just fully turn around. I just expect Joe Ingles to play close to 30 minutes, if at least, in which case they'll have that adult supervision on the floor to be able to maintain their offense.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the points of the paint. It's stunning that the Bucks are still dead last in their last 3, getting this 32 paint points. And so you look at what the Hawks, they give up paint points at home, but they limit free throws, and they're actually the second best 3-point defense. So it's going to be hard to really envision an over if Giannis isn't getting to the line and if he's not sucking in the defense to get threes. You look at the last 8 meetings between these teams, they've averaged 229, and that's a much different iteration of both of them in terms of their pace and their efficiency, but the pace was only 99, not a neck-breaking pace at all. And so, the Bucks, They've gone 12-7 to the under on the road by an average of 7.5 points per game as well. 7-3 to the under when they're road favorites. So I think they win this one with defense, with Drew locking up those guards and making just enough plays. Because you talked about what they needed to beat the Knicks. It's because they were so atrocious on offense for 3 quarters that they needed to come up clutch down the stretch. So we'll see what happens. Yeah, as long as they don't turn it over like crazy like they did last time in Atlanta, they should be able to pull this one out.
Yep, and also, by the way, get a bunch more second chance points. That's another thing. Like I was saying, you were talking about rebounds, and I do think that this is an opportunity for Milwaukee to dominate the glass. They do score the 10th most second chance points, and Atlanta's bottom 5 in terms of allowing second chance points, and that's with Clint Capella playing 27 of 40 games this season for them. So without him in there, I think you feel even better. Like I said, I'll be talking about Brolo getting some boards tonight in this one. So Nate, let's go ahead and jump right into our first NBA player prop for tonight.
Yeah, I wanted to target the Rockets, who are making their first appearance against this Kings team that is still second in offensive rating, I believe. And I want De'Aaron Fox I like his assists here tonight, first and foremost, because I'm concerned about another blowout. The last game against Orlando, he had 11 points, 9 assists, and then took an early seat. Domantas Sabonis also 8 assists. They need a full workload to really fill it up in terms of the points, rebounds, and everything, but they can get 9 dimes. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if Fox is up to 8 assists by halftime against this Houston team, which is, 4th worst defensive efficiency, 4th worst assist to field goal ratio, 4th most 3-pointers, and most fast break points allowed on the road. So 8 assists gets you plus 145 at FanDuel. His prop's only at 6.5, but that's not good odds. So I think you tack one more on here and get you some juice. And then at DK, 11.5 rebounds assists seems fine to me. Close to even money. Tack on a few rebounds. At home this season, he averages 11 assists and rebounds. That's 6.5 assists, 4.5 rebounds. Same numbers, basically, his last 7 against Houston, along with 25 points per game. Those games were a little closer last season, but they haven't had the weaponry that they have now. I think Herter with Monk, with those guys on the wing for Fox to kick it out to, this could be over quick. Or maybe it hangs around, but either way, you're happy you have the assists. And 3 straight games he has not gotten to this point in terms of his peripherals. He did have 9 dimes in both of his last home games, but against kind of more freewheeling Western Conference teams, Denver and Utah, 15 rebounds assists, 13 rebounds assists. So I think the peripherals are safe for Fox as he takes a little bit of less of a usage rate as the main scorer and becomes more of a true point guard for this high-powered team.
Yeah, and if this total's 238, Houston has to come along a little bit to make that happen at like a 9.5 point spread there as well. So I think Fox is going to be in there at least in a part of the fourth quarter, unless this gets way out of hand. But I think as long as there's some offense going on and some pace in this game, which you expect in Sacramento, then continuing to get those peripherals, like you said, maybe worry about the points a little bit. They're also pretty high for him tonight, so I think you're much safer going with these assists and rebounds specifically, what I really like. So I'm going to move on to a game we talked about in that game video, the Bucks and Hawks. We've got John Collins in a situation that we both really liked him, without Clint Capella in this one. 22.5 points and rebounds. That's minus 115 at DraftKings. You look at, he's been coming along for sure. And in his last 4, 19 a game and 10.5 boards, playing 37 minutes a game, which is what you really love to see, him staying on the floor. Shooting 52% from the field and really only a 20% usage rate, but super efficient with that usage rate with how he's shooting and scoring. And without Capella, this is why I think we both just sort of looked, okay, well, Capella's out. And John Collins has been getting minutes and putting up numbers. So what does he do without Capella? Since last season, or really a couple seasons ago, he's got a 22% usage rate without Capella versus that 20% when he is in. The boards go up from 7.5 to about 9, and it goes up from about 16 points a game to about 17. You look at even just this season, it's been even a little bit more stark. He's up to about 9.5 boards a game in those games that Capella's not in there, definitely taking over as that primary rebounder on the starting unit. And at home, home, he's just a lot better for some reason. Plus 69, nice at home versus the plus 6 on the road that he is this season. Plays much better defense as well, down to an 110 individual defensive rating at home versus 114 on the road. So in Milwaukee, he's also been really, really good. So that's why I think you keep him on the floor, right? Like 104 defensive rating, 98 defensive rating. Those were his 2 individual numbers versus Milwaukee in their last 2 matchups. So you really need him on the floor. One of the only guys that might have the size and strength and versatility to at least like stay in front of Giannis as much as anybody can on this team. And so I think you're going to have to expect him to be out there and not worry too much without Capella in there, that he, feel good that he can get over the 23 points and rebounds combined.
Yeah, I mean, you can like overs in this game even if you like under at 236, right? Yeah. I mean, this, especially for a guy playing 37 minutes, like you mentioned, he's the best matchup they have for Giannis, basically. So he's going to be out there. I'm not that concerned about the fact that he didn't produce that much on the other end in those last 2 games. 15 points, 5.5 rebounds. Certainly doesn't get you there, but I think that this is going to come around in terms of his production and in terms of being that pick and roll partner for both ball dominant guards now. And you just look at his recent numbers against all opponents, and they're certainly well over this prop. Pacers and Knicks. Josh wanted to keep riding his Knicks at -5. I'm a little scared of it. This Pacers team has been real feisty, and they've played well on both ends of the floor. They spread the ball around, and Halliburton's main weapon on the wing right now, Buddy Hield, in his last 9, 20 points per game, 5.5 rebounds, 5 threes at 53%. His first matchup with the Knicks as a member of these Pacers, he went 5 for 10 from 3, had 23 points, and fouled out in 27 minutes. And that was a rough game overall for the Pacers offense. They had less assists than turnovers. Halliburton, by the way, is still 10 assists, so I do like his assists again tonight. But Buddy Hield is a sniper, and you're talking about a Knicks team that packs the paint, right, at all costs. And that gives up something, right? That's why they've allowed the 10th highest 3-point percentage in their last 3. That's why they're allowing the 7th most points to shooting guards in the last week. And why Hield has had some success against Tibbs teams here. So his prop is 17.5 points. It's even money. At FanDuel, you can tack on 5 rebounds, also even money for 22.5 points rebounds. You don't get good odds on him hitting 4 threes, so I don't really want to bet that. I think you assume that at least, some of his 18 points here would come from beyond the arc. So I think you just bet the points and expect him, he can still put the ball on the floor, even if the Knicks are like, we're going to chase you off the line. Hield's a scorer, and he can get it done in this matchup.
Yeah. But Buddy Hield loves some Buddy Hield. I mean, he's just a fun, flamboyant dude, and so when he gets to the Garden, I think it's game time, baby. I think he's one of those guys that likes the bright lights out there. So I love Buddy, and I feel good about him in this matchup as well. Like you said, I've been eyeing how the Knicks have not been guarding the 3-point line, which was their demise, as we talked about in that Bucks video a little bit. That was their demise against the Bucks, giving up all those threes, especially in the second half there. So if they're going to continue to allow teams to shoot better than 40% from 3, they're in trouble against this Pacers team, who will be chucking for sure. So I'm going to finish things off here. I wanted to talk. Look, we're going back to Bucks and Hawks because it's one of the games that I feel most comfortable betting on because I know who the hell is playing, which is something that we deal with every day in the NBA, right? Because neither of these teams are on a back-to-back or anything weird like that. So it's pretty easy to get these props early on and get a hold of them. So Trae Young, there was something there. I wanted to look at him. It's 26.5 points for him, so it's like a little bit too high. He does do much better without Clint Capella, but I think a bit more of a safe bet here is Brook Lopez on the Bucks, and hinted towards that in the game video that we talking about his rebounds, because this is a situation. It just seems like everything's pointing towards that 6.5 for him to get 7 rebounds is -118 on FanDuel. I still think that number is a little bit low for him because of the fact that he's been averaging about 10.5 over over his last 5. And the only game he went under 7 rebounds in his last 5 was the 19 minutes that he played when they got blown out by Charlotte in probably the surprise game of the season, that the Bucks got blown out by the Hornets at home. Still had 4 rebounds in those 19 minutes. And with no Capella, the Hawks, they're obviously a much worse rebounding team. They get 3 fewer rebounds a game and give up 6 more to their opponents. They do allow the 5th most rebounds already on the season to their opponents, and are in the bottom 5 in terms of allowing second chance points. Atlanta, they also allow the 8th most points and the 6th most rebounds to opposing centers. I know Brolo's had a few games already this season where he hasn't even gotten 5 rebounds against this team, but I think there's a much different situation. No Clint Capella, and the fact that he's been coming on, realizing how much he's had to be a much better rebounder for this team, which has the 3rd best rebound percentage since December started, because of the turnaround that Brolo's made in terms of crashing the boards.
It's concerning. I mean, he just fluctuates really wildly between, he has 19 rebounds in that slugfest with Toronto and then 3 in plenty of other games, including recent matchups with the Hawks. It's just, you don't know if the game plan is for Brolo to just box out and let Giannis go get the rebound. Just box out, because apparently that's what he does, and that's why he gets these ridiculously low counts. I do like maybe for him to hit 2 threes. He has hit quite a few against the Hawks recently, and did get hot 3 for 9 against the Knicks from deep. But I mean, really, I'm waiting on Nikola Vucevic props, and if we're talking a center here, talked about in the game video, Washington getting killed down low. Both Gafford and Porzingis are questionable, and Vuce has owned that team since he moved to Chicago.
Yeah, he would definitely put Gafford in a bit of a blender, I would imagine, as well, as much as he can, just in terms of having to step all the way out, from where he's comfortable, because Vooch has been putting up those threes as well. So I would have also liked to take Vooch. We just need to get this video out, and his props are not available, but definitely eye those by the time you're watching this, and give those a look-see. And that is all the time that we have for you in this one, so make sure to like and subscribe. Continue to follow along with us as we're coming back to you each and every weekday this season. And until we see you next, happy betting.